Welcome back to another episode of the Morning Buzz with Russell's Fishing Tech. I'm your host, Russell Hajecki, and we're sponsored by Torquay Coffee. On this beautiful morning, it's nice to have a cup of coffee and enjoy a little conversation with Richard Hajecki. Richard, how are you doing today?
Good, Russell. How you doing, man?
Good. Why don't you give the folks at home just a little intro of yourself? I think anybody who knows salmon fishing around the Lake Ontario area definitely knows who you are, but for maybe those who follow me from the Lake Michigan area, give them a little introduction, where you fish out or what you do.
Yeah, sure. So, I've been fishing Lake Ontario for 30 years. Our father had myself and my brother out there at the age of like 5, 6 years old. Mainly just fishing on the weekends. And about 12, 13 years ago, I got my license and started chartering out there. Prior to that, we got involved in some tournaments on the amateur side, and honestly found a love for tournament fishing and switched to pro. In 2007, we fished our first professional tournament and won that at our home port, Oak Orchard. And we've had some success on the tournament trail throughout the years. But our typical season is Rochester. The Port of Rochester is where we start off in March, April, and fish brown trout. Probably one of the best brown trout shorelines on Lake Ontario in the springtime. Then we head up to Wilson about the last week of April to fish the first tournament in St. Catharines on normal years. And that's kind of where our salmon bite really starts is that Niagara Bar region. And we'll hang out there for about a month and a half, fish a few tournaments, and then head back to Oak Orchard, which we pretty much call our home port for the rest of the season. And so that's a quick rundown on our history and kind of what we do throughout the season.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that Niagara bite. That's something I've mentioned a couple times in my podcast already, just because I personally have fished there and fished a tournament there. Sort of a unique piece of structure, unique situation. So why don't you maybe just explain, for people maybe that haven't fished it before, or again, maybe our Lake Michigan followers, what is that exactly, and why do the fish congregate there in the spring?
Yeah, Lake Ontario, for the most part, is just a big bowl, and there's not a ton of structure once you get out past, 40, 50 feet for the most part around the lake. But there's two pieces of structure on the western basin. You got the Niagara Bar and the Toronto Islands. The Niagara Bar is where the Niagara River comes out of Lake Erie into Lake Ontario, and it created this bar over time, I guess. And there's a heck of a drop off where it'll take it from about 40 feet down to 200-300 feet in a matter of maybe less than a mile, maybe a half a mile. And it's a very steep drop off. And the fact that we've got that nutrient rich water coming out of Lake Erie, with really green water, attracts the bait fish and that just attracts the salmon. So in the springtime, that's your warmest water coming into Lake Ontario. And I think the number is something like 80% of the water in Lake Ontario comes from Lake Erie. So, it's just a huge fish magnet, and it just holds a pile of salmon in the springtime. And you'll see hundreds of boats out there during some of the derbies and tournaments, and everyone's trying to fish that bar early in the season. But as the season progresses, you get in the middle of May, and that water starts to expand a little bit with just the typical days warming the water up and whatnot. And so people can start to spread out a little bit. But there's what I call the Niagara Bar region, is probably from the U.S. border, maybe 10, 12 miles to the east. And that's where we kind of hang out in the springtime, and the salmon fishing can be explosive. I mean, there's no reason why some days you can't go out there and catch 20, 30, 40, 50 salmon a day. So it's just, it's a really fun fishery.
Yeah, it was unique experience when I was there. I went and fished the Wilson Invitational Tournament. I don't remember. It must be 5, 6 years ago now, something like that. Yeah. And you're right. It's a unique piece of structure. One of the things that separates Lake Ontario from Lake Michigan that I think's fun to talk about and sort of analyze and just, it's just good education for people at home is that the water is definitely a little bit different in Lake Ontario still than Lake Michigan. And the main reason is what you just said. Lake Erie's feeding into Lake Ontario, and that's where they're getting the bulk of their water. So you guys, I know, just from my experience and then obviously talking to you guys, you still have quite a bit of color in your water. Maybe just take a minute or two and talk about that. Like, not just at the Niagara Bar, but I mean, even when you're fishing in other ports, what do you see on an average day? Are you looking for more of that green water, blue water? What kind of water, what are the average day and what are you looking for and where do you do your fishing primarily?
Yeah, the way Lake Ontario sets up east and west, and the fact that all that water's coming in the western basin of Lake Ontario, you can typically find your green water on the western basin, and as you get out to the east end of Lake Ontario, it'll get pretty gin clear, and you get up into the St. Lawrence region with the Thousand Islands and whatnot, and it's nothing to be able to see 40, 50, 60 feet down on a good day. And that's how clear the water gets. But that green water is what we look for in the springtime. That's holding your nutrients, and obviously it's holding the heat. And there's days where it's really, really green, like pea soup green, or if you get the right winds on Lake Erie and they stir up Lake Erie, we get some muddy water coming down that Niagara River that'll pour in there and add even more color. A lot of times in the springtime, after a little bit of a north wind or a blow, you'll see where that green water meets that black water. And I mean, it is just a distinct line, and it could drop 6, 7, 8, 10 degrees as you cross over it into that clear green or that clear cold water. But we typically hang out in that green water because that's where the salmon are, that's where the bait is, and that really dictates a lot of times what colors you're going to run. And I know there's some variance on colors between Lake Ontario and Lake Michigan. I'm sure you've seen that through the tackle shop as well.
Yeah, so let's talk about this black water for a second, because that's a term I've heard more than just you use, just to kind of explain to the people at home. So what you're referring to, if I'm correct, is you've got your green water, which is nutrient-rich colored water that's coming out of the Niagara or out of Erie or whatever the case may be, and then it's butting up against what is actually blue, clear, cold water that you're calling black because it's got that real deep blue or black looking, as you said, kind of look to it. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's got a little bit different terminology, and yeah, you're right. It's just a deep blue colored water, just gin clear. A lot of times in that break, once you get deeper into May and that Niagara River starts getting too warm and the steelhead start pushing out of it, those are great locations for surface steelhead action. That quick break right there. But yeah, it's just a break between the green water and the deep blue or that clear water, and it's usually a much, much colder on the other side of it.
Oh, that's a great perspective there. We're going to touch on tackle and colors in a little bit because I think it'll be something fun to do. But before we do that, you still do something that's unique that is still done a little bit here on Lake Michigan that I want to touch on. But I'll start it off by saying when I went to Niagara and fished that tournament, one of the things that really surprised me was because you guys have some color in your water, especially in that Wilson area, downriggers and divers were still a primary tactic, which here, especially when it comes to tournament guys, I would say downriggers would be almost last on the list, or is last on the list. Divers, they have their day, you know what I mean? They can be good, but they can also be pretty stagnant. And then for us, planer boards were really the key. So if I remember right, I think that tournament is a 6-rod tournament, or it was when I went. And we were trolling 6 boards for most of the day. I think we tried a wire and 5 boards, but I saw immediately that we were sort of the outlier when it came to that. Most guys had, a couple of riggers, a couple of divers, and a couple of boards, or I actually saw a couple of boats not even trolling any planer boards. So that part was unique there to me. But more than that was there's still a large percentage of Lake Ontario fishermen, avid tournament charter guys, who are using big boards and not inlines. And I know you do both. But why don't you talk a little bit about, for the people at home that maybe, because if you're somewhat newer to salmon fishermen in today's world, especially on Lake Michigan, you probably don't even know what a big board and a planer mast is. So why don't you talk a little bit about the two of those and sort of what you prefer when, and then maybe get into just a little bit of details on that, on how you set that big mast deal up. What boards are you using? What clips are you using? How are you attaching them? And what type of rods and reels with what type of line on it, are you using for those?
Yeah, that's going to be this will be a lengthy one because I've got a lot to talk about when it comes to the different setups. But there's it's funny. You mentioned that there's actually charter captains that I know in Lake Ontario that do not own a lead core or a copper setup, and they are charter captains. They just refuse to fish it, and so they just stick to their divers and their riggers. But moving on to the board question, yeah, I've really got into fishing inlines more and more over the last couple of years, and there's certainly benefits to it. And a lot of guys up here are so hard-headed and they just want to stick to those big boards. And it's not a bad thing. But they're just not going to be able to cover as much of the water column as efficiently as I can with the inline, offshore boards. We'll start with big boards. I grew up fishing big boards, especially spring brown trout. It was a staple up here. You run your big boards, and we run anywhere from 2 to 4, 5 lines out on each side. And typically with the big boards, you can run your baits back the same distance. So on one side, you might have them back 120 feet. The other side, maybe 80 feet. But it's very similar to what they do on Lake Erie, the big charter boats, when they're running multiple lines on a side. That works well when you have the same stuff. So like in this time of year, we're running just straight up flat lines. Or Lake Erie, a lot of times they might put a side of 5 colors out for walleye. And that works okay. You don't have to worry about too many tangles as long as the customer understands that when the board lines that are further out near the board go off, you kind of got to let it just swing back, clear the other lines before you start reeling that in. And it's a great way to fish. But the problem with big boards is not everybody has a 30-foot boat. And big boards are pretty cumbersome. And most of these multi-species boats that are out there nowadays, there's not room to put a pair of big John Otter boats in there because you're going to step on it, trip on it, break it, whatnot. So that's where the inlines really come into play. And we've been playing around with the inlines a lot. And on my Lund, that's all I'll run as inlines, whether it's an OR12 or an OR37. And on the big boat, we've been playing with it more in June and September when we got a big area of the water column that is holding fish. And what that allows us to do is run different types of lead core and copper lines on the same side and not have to worry about getting tangles. And even on my Lund, when I brown trout fish in the spring, I'm running inlines, and I have to run them a little different because I'm running all flat lines. So it's kind of the opposite of what you would typically think. My outside lines are usually longest, and as I get towards the boat, they're a little bit shorter, and that just helps with avoiding tangles. But the inline boards, I like the OR12s up to about a 10 color, and then I feel like it has a little bit too much drag on that board, and I'll typically switch over to an OR37 for anything heavier than that. You certainly can run copper on OR12s, but the 37 just carries the copper so much better. Getting back to longer coppers, though, on Lake Ontario, a lot of times, especially on the east end of Lake Ontario, that thermocline could get down to 100 or 150 feet. And that's really where copper fishing started out on Lake Ontario, was the east end. They'll run coppers up to 500, 600, 700 feet out there all day long in the summertime. The 500 and 600 coppers on inline boards really is, it's a lot for that OR37 to carry that kind of weight. And, so that's where the big boards kind of come back into play, because they can keep those copper lines out to the side more instead of dragging behind the boat, where when you hook into a salmon, it'll have more of a chance to get into that line if it's directly behind the boat.
So how do you work that on the big boards if you're running those real long coppers? Are you only running one aside or a couple aside, and you're resetting them completely each time?
When we're running the long coppers, you usually aren't running more than one aside. There's a few guys that'll throw a couple out there, but when you do that, I personally want to keep the same length coppers on that side. And we're just using Scotty pinch pads as releases, and we're sliding them down the tow line.
Are you using rubber bands with those then?
What's that?
Are you using rubber bands with those pinch pads, or just putting the line straight in there?
So what I'm going to say here is probably not recommended, and people probably will look at me funny, but we actually clip it like 6 inches past the copper, not on the copper, and that's what we've done for years. And I honestly don't have many issues with it. A few times a year, I will re-terminate that swivel there. but I can't say I've ever had one break on me clipping it to the copper. But, most people, when I tell them that, are like, they look at me funny. And so a lot of people do put a rubber band on and just clip it to the rubber band. They'll half hitch rubber band onto the copper. So I would probably recommend that for most people, because I don't want to be responsible for people losing tackle. But
well, that'd be okay with me, Rick. Don't worry about that. We got to sell some more.
Crossed my mind as I was saying it, but just to circle back, the releases we use for brown trout we get them through Amish Outfitters. They're a little release that slides in the line. They're a great release. The only problem with them is a lot of times in the springtime when we're brown trout fishing, you get heavy south winds on Lake Ontario that's bringing that warmer air in. And you could fish a 20, 30 mile an hour south wind because you're typically fishing less than 20 feet. The problem with those releases is the wind gets them and carries them right at the line. So what we've done is we've added weight to them by putting a little screw and a little lock nut in them. There's a little spot there that the lock nut fits in perfectly. So the weight of that alone really helps get it down the line faster, and it also keeps it down there. We also put a electrical thimble or whatnot in the hole that the line would slide in. So I think they were made where you can just snap them right on the line and not have them on there permanently. But what that thimble does, it's like a brass thimble. You can get it at Lowe's, and it just helps the release slide down the line. I believe I've got something on Lake Ontario United with some pictures or whatnot explaining that, but just a little tweak to that release to make it work a little better.
So are you using Amish Outfitter boards then?
No, Big John Otter boats is what we typically run up here. I ran some of those boards that pull like a freight train, and what I found is, they pulled great, and I didn't get a lot of line sag when I was running heavier coppers and whatnot. But I also couldn't see a shaker when it hit that board because it towed so tight and so hard. With the otter boats, the way they slide through the water with that keel, and there's not a lot of boat in the water, they pull pretty good. You're not going to run a pair of 500s on off of one side. It's just not going to happen because it doesn't have the pulling power. But it'll allow you to see a small dragger by the way, if you can just picture the way the board's supposed to be running when you put it out there and see where it's running, and then maybe it sags back a little bit, it's doing something a little different. You can tell that there's a dragger on there, and that's why I like the otter boats for that particular reason.
So you almost treat that otter boat like a big inline at that point. When it starts to look funny, a little dragging back, it's not running to the side like it should, something's not right with it.
Exactly.
This is super interesting to me because I don't know if you know this or not, but I talk a lot about pump handles. I'm sure you've heard me talk about that at some point. That's a big deal for me, and I think it's becoming super popular for my followers because it's the most versatile setup, especially for guys that are either re-rigging or just rigging up and they don't want to own 20 planer board rods, which a lot of us have accumulated over the years. But here locally, from me to north for a couple of ports, it's the only place on the lake that big boards are still extremely popular. But here we use them exactly like you do, but a little bit different. We run those pump handles on them, and we run, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe even up to 6 on a side. So we have been running those Amish Outfitter boards or homemade boards similar because it's the only thing on the market that'll pull, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10-ounce weights on one side. Like you said, I mean, the other boat, I owned a pair of otter boats and tried them at one time, and I sunk them both in the first trip and snapped them off. So never did that again. But it's interesting because everything you're talking about is the same in relative to what I talk about, which is the big board setup works perfect when the fish are in a very narrow band of the water column, which for here, for us in Wisconsin, that actually ends up playing out for more than half the season. From about Memorial Day till, some years end of July, some years early July. But for a good chunk of the season, our water stays cool, the fish are up high, and they're in a pretty narrow 10, 20 feet section of the water column to where you can load your rods up, basically, put 8-ounce weights on one side, 10-ounce weights on the other, all out the same distance, and you cover that 20-foot section of the water column. For those of you at home that don't know, one of the things that is obvious, I guess, that both Rick and I kind of skipped is with a big board, it's attached to, a planer board mast, which is basically a giant pole, and then, the line goes out each side, and most of us nowadays are using braided line. I'm guessing that's probably what you are too, Rick?
Yep.
Okay, we're using braided line heading out to the boards, but the big advantage is when you get a fish on, it's just you and the fish. You're not dealing with an inline, and even though there are things like the Sam's release now that I talk about, and other styles and strategies to catch fish without fighting the planer board, there is still something there. There's some weight there. There's a board there. So the big board, there's a super advantage there that when you trip it off that line and it's just you and the fish, you don't have to worry about any of that other stuff. So I think it's one of the most underused tactics on the Great Lakes right now. But it's obviously something that if you wanted to set up for it, it's quite the setup. So what kind of mast do you have, and what pound braided line are you using? Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, just to circle back on a few things, with the big boards in the springtime with brown trout typically out here, your average brown trout's probably 3 to 4 pounds, 18, 20 inches. So what the big boards allow me to do for my customers is go down to really light tackle. So we're running a medium light action 9-foot rod, 10-pound test, 27 size or a 20 saltus or a 27 size reel you would find for on the sea lines, the Iowa sea line reel. So it makes it a little more fun to catch those 3 and 4 pound brown trout. And then when you get a 9, 10, 12 pound brown trout on, the fight on that tackle is just a blast. And the other thing, getting back to pump handles, yeah, they use those a lot back here in Lake Ontario when I was growing up in the 80s and whatnot. And I agree with you. And guys that have these multi-species boats, for them to go out and buy 2 copper setups from 100 foot to 500 feet, they just don't have the room for all those rods. So I always recommend, guys just getting into it, get an extra pair of wire rods and get some weights. You call them pump handles. I've seen the torpedo divers, whatever it is, but learn how to fish those effectively. And you only need 2 to 4 rods on your boat rather than a dozen copper lead core rods.
Yeah, you're 100% on cue there. A guy can have, 2 to 6 planer board rods and cover basically the surface from to 80 feet down with an assortment of weights. And for us here, at least, that's going to cover almost everything. Obviously, like you said, on I believe it's the eastern end of Lake Ontario where the water really gets warm and they tend to fish deep. That may not be a super productive setup for parts of the season, but in other parts of Lake Ontario, it will be.
Yeah. So talking about the planer mast, I am not a planer mast on the bow of the boat kind of guy. And it's very simple to understand. The way my brain works is you put that mast on the front of your boat and you can look at your hand. In your tip of your fingers is the bow of your boat. And you put that planer mast on the front there and you start moving your hand left and right, and you can see how much more the bow of that boat's going to move. So when you're trying to run those lead core and copper lines and you're close to bottom and you've got to turn for whatever reason, the bow of the boat's going to have the most movement and it's going to stall those planer boards out more. Where if you were to move those planer reels back mid-ship, you're not going to get as much stalling on those boards. So I actually run my planer reels off my radar arch, so it's further back on the boat, and not everybody can do that. I mean, some boats they use the open bow where the seat pedestal is to put a pole in there. But I typically try to keep my planer reels a little bit further back, around at least midship, just to keep from having all that board stall when you're making turns or you've got to avoid a boater coming at you. But we have electric reels in our planer. On our arch that helps with letting them out and bringing them back in. But it's just a really simple setup. You got your planer reel and a planer board, and then you just have your releases that slide down the line. Yeah,
that is it is a pretty simple setup, and like I said, I think it's one that probably is underused, and especially if people are going to use this pump handle setup, or if you're really hardcore into spring browns or summer steelhead, if that's kind of your thing, which I've got some customers, and I'm sure you've got some charter customers that they prefer summer steelhead. That's really an ultimate setup for that as well, because you can go out there with 6 high lines, mono and some kind of small weight or no weight at all or whatever, and some spoons and really cover a lot of water with those big boards. So let's talk a little bit about colors and tackle. I found this super interesting when, like you said, when I started to travel over there to sell tackle. And then, of course, now, we're literally selling tackle out of our store here in Sheboygan every day to customers on Lake Ontario, multiple times a day now probably. We're shipping orders out to customers on Lake Ontario. And the number one thing I found so interesting is that Lake Ontario fishermen in general love black for kings. Do you have like some thought process there? Do you think it's the watercolor? It's almost a non-factor here on Lake Michigan, like very, 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 very little success and usage with anything that's got really black on it, other than maybe black dots here on Lake Michigan. Why do you think black works so good on Lake Ontario?
Well, I grew up in Rochester, New York, where the home of Northern King was back in the heyday when Northern King was one of the top trolling spoons out here in Lake Ontario. And if you think about their lineup and look at their old catalogs, I mean, all their spoons were black and white or black and silver, and then they just put a piece of tape over the front of it, whether it was purple, orange, or green. And nowadays you've got spoons like the Carbon 14, which is just a staple out here every morning, no matter if it's April, May, or August or September. That Carbon 14 with the black face and the glow cup just seems to be a great spoon out here. I'm not sure why it works so well. The various black colors, and I don't have the Seasick Water, which I came up with many years ago. It's got black edges on it. I'm not. I couldn't tell you why black works so well, but it is in a lot of the color patterns that we run out here. You joke because just about everything if something's going to be good if it's got green, black, and glow in it. Out here on Lake Ontario, it's just the three colors that seem to always work.
Yeah, I used to travel when I worked for a company years ago, fishing tackle company, and I used to travel, and I heard a seminar one time from one of the best fishermen on the West Coast, salmon fishermen, and he stood in front of everybody in the seminar and said, every lure you buy here at the show will work as long as it's green and it glows. So I think you could make that same statement for Lake Ontario. You just have to edit it a little bit to say every lure will work as long as it's black, green, and it glows. But I've told this story to quite a few people. I'll tell you just because I think you'll find it humorous and the people at home will. But that Carbon 14 spoon is my arch nemesis. It absolutely is. So everybody catches them on it but me. And that is one of the few black spoons I would say I've actually physically seen people have success with on Lake Michigan. So I went to a tournament in Michigan one time, maybe 5 years ago or so, and we had heard that guys were getting some fish right away at first light on that Carbon 14. So I ran one side of the boat, my buddy Sammy ran the other side. So we doubled up the riggers because in Michigan, it's lines, not lures. In Wisconsin, it's lures. So we put double spoons on both the downriggers. We were actually kind of targeting lake trout because the salmon bite was so tough, but you'd get like a half-hour window of salmon. And he put a double Carbon 14 on his rigger, a mag on the bottom and a standard on the top. Now in Lake Ontario, that's probably a great tactic. And maybe for the average guy in Lake Michigan, that's a great tactic. But needless to say, we caught two kings that morning. They came on a Wonder Bread and a NBK on my side, on my rigger, and he never got a bite. Well, about 9 o'clock, my daughter Lily's probably like 7 at the time, and she asked me, she said, "Dad, I hate that black spoon." She said, "You never catch anything on it." I said, "I know." And she said, "Sammy had 2 of them on. Can you believe it?" I said, "We're never going to let him do that again." And she goes, "Watch this." She grabbed those 2 and found 4 more down below and threw them in. All of them. She went right all by herself. She grabbed those 2. She went down below. She picked out the other 4 we had. She had them all in her hand, and she chucked them in the lake. And she's like, "He won't run those anymore."
I don't want to promote throwing lures overboard into the water, but I've got a customer here at the marina, and he had his son throw every single one of his off the dock because he hated it that much because he couldn't catch anything on it. Yeah, I got to be honest, that spoon for me is a spoon I don't want to run above 70 or 80 foot. That's a spoon in July and August when the thermocline's down deep. I'm going to throw down in that 80 to 110, and it works well for us. But that's really about the only time I can get it going with any consistency.
Yeah, it's interesting. we made a version of that in the salmon candy lineup now. We called it Grot's Revenge. That's a little bit different. It's got a giant glow ladder on the front and an eye, and then it's got a silver back. And I'm hoping that that'll be a little more maybe productive here. One of the things here is we just don't do super well with glow backs anymore because of the clean water. And that's where, again, it's a little different by you guys because you've got some colored water. So that might be part of it. But, one of the other things that's interesting is it just doesn't play out into spoons. It plays out in the flashers. I'm assuming crankbaits, and even into flies a little bit. One of the patterns that a lot of guys talk about over there is like Fat Nancy in a flasher is talked about quite a bit. That's obviously got some black in it. So it's interesting to me that it's, and almost every spoon, not everyone, but a lot of spoons have some sort of black ladder back on them, even if that's not the main color. So it's very interesting in the color patterns, but maybe why don't you share with some of the people at home, maybe like what are a couple of your go-to spoon colors? Doesn't matter make or model, just colors. And then flasher flies, same thing.
Yeah. So just to keep on the carbon 14, we were fishing a tournament in Toronto many years ago, and there was a spoon out here called a Big Ern, and there was a guy that made it. He made the spoon up near Bay of Quinte, and it was just a gigantic spoon. I mean, it made a Dreamweaver mag look small. And this guy opens up his bag and he goes, I follow your reports and stuff like that on the forums. He's like, I really appreciate it. He goes, I want to bring you some of these spoons. He goes, I'll let you pick one of these spoons out. And most of the spoons were colors I typically wouldn't run, but one stood out, and it basically was a glow cup, black front. And what he did is he put a black ladder back on the glow cup and then stacked a green and glow ladder back on the black side. So we grabbed that, and that spoon quickly became a very good producer for us. So I taped up some carbon 14s the same way. And that's been a really good spoon for us the last few years. So we just doctored up that carbon 14 a little bit with some ladder backs. And I'll tell you, that black ladder back on the glow cup really, really pops. It's a really cool looking pattern. Like I said earlier, Seasick Wilder was a spoon I came up with many years ago. It derived from Stinger's Penguin. That was a really good spoon for me. Basically the same color pattern, but the Stinger had an orange dot and it wasn't glow. Northern King made me that Seasick Wilder with a glow front and a green dot, which is what I really wanted, was the green dot, because green is such a great color out here. That's usually a spoon that'll go down every morning on one of my downriggers. The last couple seasons, that UV green jeans has been a phenomenal spoon for us. This summer, I had it going really well until about August, and then it kind of died for us. But it's a great spoon for steelhead and salmon, and that'll typically be found on my higher rigger, which the way I fish is I run a inverted V basically. So my center rigger is always going to be in that 60-degree water, and then everything else in my spread is going to be typically deeper than that. So you'll find that spoon hanging out on that high rigger most of the times. For flashes and flies, we run a lot of atomic flies. A hammer fly has been really good. A hijacker fly has been really good for us. And it's weird because those flies have a lot of blue in them, which is not something you see in the spoon patterns on Lake Ontario. Okay. And then you've got your green glows and your green crinkles and whatnot, which are really great flies. And the stud flies really come around the last few years. I would say, we fished a women's breast cancer tournament in August out of Walcott, New York this past season. And they gave us you could buy this combo, a Spin Doctor and fly combo, and the proceeds basically went towards the breast cancer foundation or whatever we were fishing for. And that combo was probably one of my best combos the rest of the season, and it ended up helping us win. We took a fish on it during that tournament and helped us win a tournament later that season at Oak Orchard. So that stud fly has been really good. We like to run a lot of 8-inch Spin Doctors and chips when we're pulling flies, but when it comes to meat, I'm not a big guy of running small flashes when it comes to our meat rigs. We're usually going to pull, big 11-inch chips or big kingfishers, stuff like that. I don't know why we don't do so well on the smaller stuff, and I know I hear you talk about it a lot when you're giving seminars and you're doing these podcasts in your videos on YouTube. You guys run a lot of meat rigs with 8-inch spin doctors, but for us, we have our best luck and we catch our better fish running those monster paddles with our meat rigs. And that's kind of one of the things we've done for years, and it's really helped us when we're fishing tournaments.
Well, I think one of the things that naturally just is different that makes it different, especially when I talk versus maybe somebody in Michigan or whatever, is just that we don't get a lot of warm water. So, we spend the bulk of our time fishing substantially higher than you guys probably do. So number one, I think meat just is better for you guys than it is for us, because I think that is a program that primarily works better down deep. And then number two, I think big stuff, big fish blades, big spin doctors, things like that, also work better down deep. I think you'd agree, 12-inch kingfisher or 11-inch paddle is probably not something you'd run 50 down regularly. But I would say 50 down is probably in the key area where I would catch 70% of my kings a year.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. I definitely, and anybody that has listened to me or knows us, knows that we like to fish deeper than most. But we did win a tournament in St. Catharines about 5 years ago where we were fishing 50, 60 feet of water, and all we pulled were 7 of those big paddles with meat on them. And, we were running them on 150 and 200 coppers, divers, our riggers. I mean, where they were down 40 foot, and that was the deal. And we had boats going by us, and they just, they were pulling typical spreads, and they weren't pulling the size of the fish we were. So, I mean, I have used those big paddles in shallower water and skinnier water, but for the most part, it's dropping them down into that deeper water where they really excel.
Yeah, well, I think, if there's a lot of fish around, it's a really stacked up, and I don't know, maybe that tournament was or wasn't, but if there's a lot of fish around, I think you can get away with that big stuff up high if they're aggressive and there's a ton of fish, and you can sort of use it as a sorter, is what I like to call it, where you won't get a lot of small fish on those setups. So if they're just biting like crazy, it's one of those days like you talked about at Wilson where it's a 40, 50 fish day. I caught when I went to Wilson, I caught a bunch of fish on a fish blade down 50 on a rigger, but
yep.
they were biting. I mean, in pre-fishing, yep. Right before we got that big northeaster, they were just simply biting. We were getting 30 plus bites a trip. So truthfully, most of what you put down got bit. And, this was sort of one of the tactics I thought of to try to just catch bigger fish. Mm-hmm. As normal, the wind blew on Thursday or whatever it was and changed the whole tournament structure, or tournament, look. But yeah, no, I agree with you. It's interesting. Yes, you guys run a lot more spin doctors than we do. Over here, it's much more of a paddle fishery. The salmon candy flashers, the pro trolls, the opties, the pro kings, whatever. I would say, it's sort of weird because Michigan, I would say, is like 75% spin doctors, 25% everything else. Wisconsin's probably 75% paddles, 25% everything else. And then Lake Ontario, the way I see it at least, is about a 50-50 mix. 50% paddles like Pro Troll, Pro King, and Salmon Candy, and then 50% spin doctors. So that too, I think, has to do probably with location on the lake. My guess is the guys on the warmer end of the lake probably fish a little more spin doctors and big fish, and the guys on the cooler end of the lake probably fish a little more paddles. But that would just be my guess based on, what I see on our lake.
Yeah, typically it was the opposite. Back in the day, it was the east end was a lot of chips, the west end was a lot of spin doctors, but now it's just so intermingled. You got guys running both, but I felt like the chips were probably a little bit more popular on the east end of Lake Ontario. There's a lot of west. The thing is, like Shane's father and whatnot, they would come over to Lake Ontario and fish that west end, so they had a lot of influence on what those guys were running. When that spin doctor came out, they had those charter captains that they've known from coming over here fishing those tournaments. So they were some of the first guys to have those spin doctors. So that's why I think the Dreamweaver product on the west end of Lake Ontario was probably a little more popular.
Awesome. Yeah, one of the last things we can kind of chat about a little bit is, so spoons in general are way more popular by you guys than they are here. Almost every spoon manufacturer that I know basically, has a better, sales record on Lake Ontario than Lake Michigan, unless their product just isn't popular there or whatever. But talk a little bit about size, just talk about, when you prefer maybe a mini versus a standard versus a mag or whatever the terminology is that you like to call it, and why you prefer those particular sizes where a little bit, because I think it's something that I don't want to say it will come back on Lake Michigan, but, and a lot of it to some extent is my fault because for 10 or 15 years now, I've pushed super hard on flashers and flies, which I think helped a lot of customers catch a lot more big kings. But I think, you'd probably agree. I think spoons just in general catch more numbers. So, it's a good thing to have in the water for sure. Have a mix of it on a lot of days. So talk a little bit about the size of spoons and when you prefer certain ones.
Yeah, we run a lot of spoons out here, and typically on charters, we'll run more spoons than anything else. Usually have only a few flies or meat rigs in the water on charters, but spoons just flat out catch them. We use a variety of spoons. I run mostly Dreamweaver products, but I have Warrior Stingers. I have a lot of different products. Fishing spring brown trout, I like a stinger size just because I can run it back 40, 50 feet, put it down 3 to 5 feet, and the spoon's going to stay under the water. What I find with some of the Warriors in the super slim version is if I try to do that, I have it skiing behind the back of the boat. It just doesn't have the weight to get down there or the shape to get down there and stay just below the surface for me. But once we get down into salmon water on the Niagara Bar, I have no problem going right to a Dreamweaver mag and running a Magnum program out there on the bar in early May. Those alewife that are coming in from the deep, those are your mature alewife that are coming in to spawn in the shallows, and those are your bigger alewife. So I love running mags early in the season, where a lot of guys I think would probably run smaller spoons because they think the bait might be smaller early in the year, and there's certainly smaller bait out there, especially your immature stuff. A lot of times in the summertime, I like to run the opposite of what you were talking about earlier when you were talking about that tournament you fished, where we'll run a mag above a regular spoon and we'll use a pin cheater that way. I love that setup. Once we get into July and August and we're fishing thermoclines, that setup works very well for us. Targeting steelhead, typically that super slim size is what I'm running. The steelhead seem to love that super slim from Dreamweaver. So we'll run a lot of that when we're steelhead fishing in June and July on the surface, or, down a little bit on 5 colors and slide divers and whatnot. But I bet you we run more regulars and mags than anything else, especially when we're targeting salmon. That seems to be the two sizes that no matter what brand it is, we'll stick with their regular size, and their Magnum sizes is probably going in the water 80% of the time when we're fishing salmon.
So do you have a preference on depth of water for the size of spoon? Obviously, probably not if you like that standard with a mag stacked above it.
No, I really don't. I never really thought about it. So, we do a lot of switching up. At the end of the day, there's usually a pile of spoons that has to get put away. And some days, yes, they will prefer the regular size over the mag size, but I don't really have a preference when it comes to, I'll only fish a mag down this deep and everything above it's going to be a regular size spoon. I've never really thought about it that way or fished that way.
Interesting. So, and this is what I love about salmon fishing so much, is that I believe 75 to 90% of salmon fishing, I use the model, you can skin a cat a bunch of different ways. And this goes that my kind of hard and fast rule is this: if I'm fishing 15 feet or higher, I like a small spoon. I call them a mini, whether it's a Pro King Pro spoon or a like our new Salmon Candy Mini or whatever, like a 3-inch or less spoon. Like a stinger size, standard stinger or super slim would be the biggest spoon I would use in that particular case. From 15 to 60 down, I almost exclusively run standard size spoons. The only time I'll vary from that would be like fall kings or on the harbor mouth or whatever. But if I'm out in the lake and I'm going to fish 15 to 60 down with a spoon, it's going to pretty much be a standard size. And then when I fish deeper than 60, I would say the bulk of the time it's probably going to be a mag. And that I always base that kind of on, it's the same mentality I've had with flashers. I like to go to that big 11-inch paddle or a big fish blade kind of down below that 70-foot mark. And from the surface to 70, I fish almost exclusively 8-inch. So, it's interesting. It's a feel thing, like you said. There's obviously no hard and fast rule. I mean, a salmon will definitely bite a standard spoon down 100. They'll definitely bite a mag down 50. It's not that they won't. It's just, for me, it seems like that's been more productive than others. So, any other sort of standardized kind of tips or things you could maybe give the Lake Ontario listeners or even the Lake Michigan listeners, from a guy that's fished a lot of tournaments and a lot of days on the water charter fishing, what would you say would be a couple of key things that you just say, really pay attention to these things if you want to try and catch a couple more fish in 2021?
I would point I would point them to their electronics. I know a lot of guys with their electronics, they go the cheapest route they can just to get something on there to show them depth and a few fish. But my electronics are probably responsible for more of my catches than any one single lure on my boat, and just watching my electronics. And a lot of times during practice, that's what I'm doing, is watching my electronics, trying to understand what's happening under the boat, try to understand what the fish are doing, how they're reacting to stuff. You can tell all these things by your electronics. And if you ice fish, you can tell how a fish reacts to your lure when you're ice fishing with electronics. So I spend a lot of time watching that. Your baits aren't always going to be in the area where the fish is at. So again, your electronics, watching where those marks are in the water column and adjusting your spread on the fly has put a ton of fish in my boat. You're trolling along, and all of a sudden your thermocline's at 50 foot, and you got most of your stuff in that, let's say 40 to 70 foot, and you see a deep mark down there. I mean, dropping down to a deep mark almost, I'd say 60% of the time, is probably going to generate that bite. You throw it right in front of their face and they'll chomp it. I think a lot of guys just underuse their electronics, and I feel like the more you get comfortable with them and use them and understand them, it'll definitely increase your catch rates. And one of the biggest mistakes I made when I first started tournament fishing is I was looking at the top part of the water column. We were fishing a tournament in Toronto, and we got in at the end of the day, and we had an okay day, but we weren't cashing the check. And one of the guys said, "Man, you must have killed him today." I'm like, "Nah, man, we did an average day." He goes, "Oh, when I saw those deep marks, I thought you guys were going to be all over them." And we had our fish finder looking at the top 50 because the lake had flipped and the thermocline was at like 35 foot, 40 foot. So I didn't even think to look at the bottom at 150. And I guess they were stacked down there, and those guys crushed it. So the fact that I wasn't watching the bottom and seeing that stuff. So I always tell people now is, I understand you want probably only going to fish the top 50 to 100, maybe top 100 foot, but just keep an eye on the stuff below that. It's, it's not hard to drop a rigger down there real quick if you're marking some fish, and those might be fish that nobody else is targeting, so there's no pressure on them. So that's probably one of the biggest things I would say is, just utilize your electronics a little more. And I'm starting to use side imaging a little bit, especially later in the season, finding bait. After a blow, to blow the bait around a little bit, the tournament we won here in the fall, if it wasn't for the side imaging, I would have never been able to find that bait again as quick as I did, because I was able to look 400 feet on either side of my boat. So when we got to where we were the first day and we were fishing the first day, the bait in the picture was gone. So we started trolling around, and being able to look, let's call it 800 feet, I was able to start marking that bait again and turn into it and start fishing it, and it generated some bites. So, they've seen it in the bass and walleye world, where this new forward-facing sonar has really changed the game for those guys. So I would just say, get some good electronics, understand how they work, and utilize them, and they're going to put more fish in the boat.
Awesome. Well, that's a great tip. Sure appreciate you taking the time today, Rick, to jump on the Morning Buzz with Russell's Fishing Tech. Once again, I'm Russell Gahagan. We had Richard Hajecki with us this morning. We had a great conversation, and if you're looking to watch more of these, we'll be back next week with another guest. So good luck fishing out there.
Thanks, Russell.